Hello, everyone. Welcome to our very first class in Business English and Correspondence. I am your instructor, Shalal Galapi Bilyones, and today I'll be discussing with you the different topics that will be covered in week one. So, to start, the lessons that we'll be discussing today will be about business correspondence, its definition, the different purposes of business correspondence and its types. Of course, we also have to talk about different forms of business correspondence and the things that we need to consider when we are studying about business correspondence and when we are writing it. And the second part would be about the overview of the different areas of writing. So let's get this started. First off, it's just but prim and proper for us to know what is correspondence. So when we talk about correspondence class, it is any written or digital communication exchanged by two or more parties. Text messages is already a correspondence. Why? Because it's a communication that is being done by two parties, two people, and they are using, of course, uh, digital means, phones, in doing that. All right, so that's why it's an example of correspondence. Now, we go to specific meaning of business correspondence. So when we talk about this term, it refers to a written exchange of information used for business purposes. Of course, text messages used for business purposes is still a business correspondence. So business letters are examples of business correspondence. We have different emails. Okay, it's also a business correspondence. Later on, I'll be discussing with you the different types of business correspondence. So why do we need to learn business correspondence? First off, it's important that we need to learn about this because business correspondence would help maintain a proper relationship. Why? In a very big organization, for example, it is impossible at times to directly talk to people in authority, people who are having higher positions. So if you're having a hard time communicating with them, then business correspondence will save you for that. Okay, next, it is serving as an evidence. For example, in an organization, the CEO of that organization released a new policy, right? And for example, in that new policy, they are requiring the employees to submit this requirement, for example, right? And what if that employee does not submit that requirement? Then, of course, the person in authority or the manager can also direct him or her to the memo that was released months ago or weeks ago. So that served as an evidence that that policy was already released and that the employees need to adhere to that. Okay, so that's the second purpose of business correspondence. Third, it is used to create and maintain goodwill. Okay, for example, the customers, they are having some complaints to the company. For example, they will be writing a letter of complaint. Okay, it's very necessary for a company to reply to that letter because at the end of the day, those feedbacks given by the customers would help their company improve and at the same time would let their company grow. Okay, so it is used to create and maintain goodwill. Next, it is an inexpensive and convenient form of business communication. Why inexpensive? You just have to write, right? You just have to write something, send letters, send an email. It's an inexpensive one, okay? And of course, it is a formal communication. For example, there is a complaint to that company. Most of the time, it will not be addressed if it is just a verbal complaint. That's why it is prim and proper to have a written complaint addressed to that company or addressed to that person, for example, because at the end of the day, that is something that is serving as an evidence that you complain for that person or for that company, and it is a formal way of communication that will automatically be addressed properly. Okay, and of course, the last part, it helps in the expansion of business. For example, you have like a letter to another company telling them about the new policy of that company, and if they are wanting to partner with other companies, then business correspondence is something that is very necessary. Okay, so those are the different purposes of business correspondence. We have mentioned six. Now, let's find out what are the different types of correspondence. So there are actually a lot. There are a lot of types of correspondence, but for this lesson, I'll be only focusing on two. The first one is the internal correspondence, and the second one is the external correspondence. So from the name itself, it would already give you a clue that internal correspondence is a type of correspondence that is written between the employees, units, departments, and branches of the same organization, meaning it's a correspondence within the organization or within the company. Okay, that external correspondence. External correspondence takes place between different organizations or between an organization and their individual clients. So from the word external, meaning it is outside. Okay, outside the company, outside the organization. So for example, you want to partner with other organization or with other company, so you will write them a letter. That correspondence now belongs to external correspondence. Okay, so commonly it is used to vendors, creditors, suppliers, prospective clients, donors, sponsors, and anybody outside the organization. Now, why do we have external correspondence? First reason is that it is used to promote the image of the organization. It is very necessary that the organization establish their image in the society. For example, if it's a university, external correspondence would allow other people, allow other entities, business entities, or organizational entities to be aware of the policies of that said institution, of their, if it's a university, of their offerings or something that they are doing for the community. So that's one of the reasons why there is an external correspondence. It clarifies its policies as well. That's self-explanatory. And of course, it keeps its legal entities intact and it keeps its operation going. So those are the different reasons why there are external correspondence existing. Okay, next we have different forms of business correspondence. The most famous, and this is very, the usual thing that we're doing, it's the letters, okay? Business letters. So we'll get to know more about that later as we go along this subject. So we also have emails. Right now, we are fond of using this because this is the most convenient one of sending correspondence within and even outside the organization. It's very easy and you don't have to write it in a piece of pen, on a piece of paper rather. Okay, it's very easy and very fast. It's a fast means of communication. And of course, we have text messages, although this one is not so formal, but usually if you just want to be quick, especially in terms of not so formal setup, though, you can use these text messages. Of course, memo to clarify policies, to inform the employees about the new policies and requirements. For example, memo is very needed. And of course, we have voicemails. It's also not formal though, but it's another form of business correspondence that we are using. And of course, the fax. Okay, so those are the forms of business correspondence. Now, what are the things that we need to consider when we are writing business correspondence? Well, we have to consider its destination. It is very important to know the destination of your business correspondence. For example, you want to write it to someone in authority, okay, someone who has a position. It's very important that you know his or her title, his or her position, so that you will not make a mistake in addressing the person concerned. Okay, so you will not commit mistake of making or downgrading the position of that person, or creating a title that is not even his or her title. You know what I'm saying? So you have to consider its destination. And also, if you do that, you will be able to know what form of communication would best suit to that person whom you are sending the correspondence. Okay, so if you're going to write that to your employees, if you are the CEO, if you are the manager, then you can use memo for that. Okay, so that's why destination is very important, again, so that you will not create mistakes in titles and positions of the letter whom you're sending to. Second, so that you will be know what is the best form of communication or best form of correspondence that you will be using. Okay, next one, we have audience. You have to consider who are your audience. Who are the people who will be accepting and reading your communication or your correspondence? Will it be the employees? Will it be the employer? Will it be someone in a high position of that in that company? So you have to consider that. You have to know its purpose. Knowing your purpose would you would it would enable you to find out also whether you're going to use formal business correspondence, formal form of correspondence or not. Okay, is your purpose to inform of about the new policies? Is your purpose to advertise? So you have to know everything about that. And you have to consider your tone. It's very important that you do consider the tone. You have to be respectful, especially if you are addressing it to someone in authority. And of course, the format and style. You have to consider the font size, pagination, what kind of page, what kind of paper size are you going to using. So all of those stuff you need to consider. So again, you have destination, you have audience, purpose, tone, format, and style. Okay, by the way, for when talking about format and style, usually the best font size that you need to use is font size number 12. And the font styles that are common in terms of business correspondence would be Calibri and at times New Roman. Avoid using font styles that are too elaborate. You know what I'm saying? Just make it as simple as possible. What's important is that you will be able to successfully send your message across through your target audience. Okay? Now, to break the monotony of our lesson, it's nice to ponder on the words of Anne Lamott. She is actually a famous American novelist and social political activist, and she's also a writing teacher and a public speaker. She once said that all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. It is true. A lot of us would have difficulty in writing, especially in the very first part. But as soon as you have started, words will just come. Words will just flow, your ideas and your thoughts. So you have to start somewhere else. Okay? At the end of the day, you cannot write if you will not start writing at the end. After all. Okay, so let's now move on to the different areas of writing. Okay, so why is it essential? Why is business writing essential? Why is it important? First off, they allow the writer to have time to think about the message he or she wants to convey thoroughly. Unlike spoken communication, the words and thoughts just flow. And sometimes you cannot take back what you have already said. But if you are going to ponder and you compare, business writing somehow easier, and easier in a sense that you have more time to think about what would be the content of your business correspondence, of your business letter, for example. And you can be able to convey your message successfully. Next, business writing would enable you to have, or it's more accessible. They are more accessible and can be retrieved by the reader at any time convenient to him or her. For example, you will be sending a message through email. Although, for example, that person is not yet on online, but he or she can access it any time of the day, any time of the week. So it's very convenient and it's also accessible because he or she can just access it on his mobile phone, his iPad, or any other gadgets, especially now that we are living in a digital world. So it's something that is very easy and convenient. Okay, next, they present the message in details. So if you're writing, you can incorporate all the details that you want to say. All right. So it's unlike when you're just saying it, sometimes the tendency is that the listeners or the audience will miss out something that you want them to know. Whereas if you're going to write it, all the details are there and they can access it. And they can go back to that if ever they miss out something. Okay, now let's move on to the next part. They can be documented and filed. This is very important in our organization that whatever policies that they are making, the employees know it. And then employees will be able to know that those policies that they have implemented through the memos, through the documents, and they can file it as evidence as well. Okay, now let's move on to the first area of writing, which is memorandum writing. Memo is a short word for memorandum, and it's a short official note that is sent by one person to another within the same company or organization. That is according to Collins Dictionary 2020. Take note that memo is only used within the organization, so it's an internal correspondence. You should not use memo if you are going to send it to someone who is outside your company or organization. Okay, so take note, it's only within the same company or organization. Next, a memo is a type of business correspondence together with business letters, contracts, certifications, and endorsements, which is written for the purpose of effective management. Why effective management? For example, the human resource department has implemented additional requirement for work from home policy, for example, now that it's pandemic. So they can effectively manage their organization by using memo. At least the employees will be aware of the added requirements, for example, that they have implemented. So it's an effective way of managing the employees in a certain organization or in a certain company. Next, are memorandum and business letter the same? I want you to think about that question. Do you think they're the same? If your answer is no, they're not the same, well, your answer is right. Okay, they are not the same. Why? Take, for example, this one. So this is an example of a business letter. Okay, as you have noticed here, there is a header. Okay, right? There is a date. And of course, this one would be the person who will be receiving your message or your letter. And of course, there's a salutation over here, and there's the body, and this is the closing, and of course, the signature over here. Or you could see here the sender. As you have noticed, this business letter is observing a block style format. Okay, all right. So how about a memo? Let's look into our sample for our memo. Okay, wait a moment. Okay, so for our memo, we have this one. Okay, see, so this is a memo released by the Department of Education. Oh, it also has a header. It would give you an idea from what agency is that memo from, and it has a date on it. It has the number of the memorandum. It's very important for filing purposes and for referencing purposes. Okay, and of course, the title of the memo, the subject of the memo, should I say, and for whom will it be sent to? Who are the people or who are the target audience for this memo or for target readers for this memo? And of course, the message here or the content, or you can also say the body of the memo. And of course, this would be the person whom the memo has come from. Okay, so that's it. Now, if you have noticed, another example is this one. Right, this is another memo from our institution. It has a header, right, and it has the date, the number, the memorandum number, and for whom is it addressed to. So in that case, it is addressed to all faculty members of TUP Visayas, and it has a subject. What is it all about? And of course, the content. And you can see here down this part of the memo, the people or the departments who will be receiving the said memo. As you have noticed, class, there's a difference, right? In the way the memo was constructed. I gave you two examples. One is from the Department of Education and one is from our very own institution, TUP Visayas. Now, if you have noticed here in terms of formatting, there's a big difference, right? You see that in their case, the date is on the right side of on this part, okay? It's on the right side. And then here, the memorandum to and from, right? The from here is written at the bottom part of the page. Whereas if you're gonna compare it to our memo, that if it follows the formatting we're in, there's a date first in the memorandum number, and then to, from, and subject. Now, is it okay? Well, yes, it is okay because memo varies from one organization to another. A memo can have, one institution can have a template, one institution usually has a template for their own memo. What's important is that it has the common features of having the date, the header, of course, the memorandum number, who is it for, and from whom is that memo coming from, and the subject, okay, and of course the content of the memo. So if you're going to compare the two, although in terms of formatting they differ, but in terms of the important content, they are almost the same. They have the date, the memorandum number, to, from, and subject, and of course the content. Okay, so next we move on to our next part. We have about the characteristics of memorandum and letter that sets the two terminologies apart. In terms of destination, for memorandum, it is written for people within the company. But for letter, of course, it's outside the business, outside the company or organization. That's why letters are letters is an example of external correspondence. Though there are also letters that are internal in nature. It depends on how you're going to send it. But for memorandum, one thing that we are sure of, memorandum is only used within the organization. It's an example of internal correspondence. Next, in terms of format, for memorandum, we have identification lines such as date, when that memo was written, to whom is it written for, or for whom, from who, from whom does that memo come from, the subject, and of course the message. All right. For the letter, it includes letterhead, Usually it would include the name of the company, the address of the company. All right, we have the date when that letter was written, the reader's address. If you're using a block style, it would be appearing on the upper part of your letter, of course, the salutation. All right, so when you say salutation, you can say, Dear Professor Billione, something like that. So you have to indicate the position of that person. Is that person a CEO? So you have to address that person properly in the salutation part. And of course, the text, complimentary close such as respectfully yours, respectfully, very truly yours. Those are all examples of complimentary close. And of course, the signature. Next, in terms of audience, for memorandum, usually it's going to be business colleagues, people in the same organization. For letters, usually vendors and clients, sponsors, business partners, and other stakeholders outside the organization. Okay, in terms of topic, well, abbreviations for and acronyms are often allowed for memorandum, especially that in a certain organization they have jargons. They usually have abbreviations and they know about it because they are in the same organization at the end of the day. But for letters, since you are writing it outside your company, it is not okay to use abbreviations and acronyms. So you have to define them. If you will need to use them, you have to define them. And for the tone, of course, hard copy attachments can be stapled to the memo. So usually if there are attachments or schedules, for example, that you're gonna attach, you can just staple it, right? And then complementary copies can be sent to other readers. But for letters, it is formal that the attachment should be enclosed within the envelope. All right. Now for attachment or enclosures, um, for memos, it could be delivered within 3 days because again, it's just within the company or organization. But for letters, it may take more than a week, especially if you're sending it through post mail. Okay, that's why other people would say snail mail, right? Because it takes a lot of days just for you to receive the message. Okay, so those are the things that set apart memorandum from letter. Now this time we're going to talk about literary writing. I know you're all familiar with this because this has been heavily emphasized back when you were in high school, in junior high school, and in senior high school. But just let's give yourself a recap of everything. So for literary writing, we have novels, we have short stories, we have poems, we have plays and musicals, we have movie and TV scripts, parodies and satire, memoirs, and thoughtful essays. These are all different kinds of literary writing. And each of this has their own characteristics that would be different from other literary writing. Is essay writing. This is something that you will be using all throughout, most of the time actually in your college years. And even when you were in high school, you were also using this type of writing, right? So for essay writing, we have to know first, just a recap. When you say essay, it's a focused piece of writing that tries to develop an argument or narrative based on evidence, analysis, and interpretation. So, for example, your teacher would be asking you to write your thoughts about a certain topic. So, you are going to write an essay about that. And usually, you write essay to persuade readers of your position, of your belief, your principle, or your perspective. And you doing that using logical arguments. Okay, so that is an essay. Next, how do we write an essay? Of course, we have stages in writing that. First, we have to prepare. We have to think about our topic. We cannot write something that we do not know. So we have to gather facts about our topic. We have to know more about it. We have to do some research. So that belongs to the first stage, which is preparation. And then after that, we have writing. So we can start writing our essay. We have to start translating our thoughts into words and put them down into writing. And then after you're done writing, you have to revise it. You have to check into it in terms of grammar, in terms of capitalization, in terms of the use of punctuation marks. So if you think that there are things that you need to change, you need to revise it. You need to undergo the stage of revision. Okay, so those are the three stages in writing an essay. Most of the time, students are not doing the third part. They think that once they're done writing, it's already good. It's already good to go. Like they can submit it to their teachers. But revision is very important so that you'll be able to know the things that you need to edit and things that you need to change. Okay? Because most of the time when we are just writing, words just flow out of our mind, regardless, or sometimes we're not conscious that our spelling is messed up together with our grammar. So we have to double check it before handing it in to our professors or our teachers. Next, we have different parts of an essay. Of course, we know the IBC. We have the introduction. When you're writing an essay, make sure that your introduction is catchy, it's interesting enough so that you can hook the interest of your readers. And for your body also, you have to make sure that the content is meaty enough. You don't have to write a lot of elaborate words, okay, highfalutin words. What's important is that you get your message across through your target readers effectively. Okay, and of course you have to consider that an essay should have a conclusion. Your conclusion should be connected with your introduction and your body. One research has mentioned or has stated that most of the time readers would only remember the introduction and the conclusion part. And that is true. Even in the speech, most of us would just remember only the first and the last part. So because of that idea, you have to make sure that your conclusion is something that can create an impact to your target readers. Okay, so that's it for parts of an essay. Next, we have technical report writing. Okay, we have different technical reports depending on what is your organization. But first off, let's define what is a technical report. It is actually a document written by a researcher detailing the results of a project and submitted to the sponsor of that project. So for example, you are an engineer and you will be writing a technical report detailing what you have noticed in the area where you're working. So that's an example of a technical report. You can mention, for example, if your manager or your boss will tell you to go out of field and discuss the details, the problems of that project. All right. So you have to create a technical report for that. Okay. Now, what are the different characteristics of a technical report? So, of course, it has graphics. It's easy right now, especially with the advent of technology. We can easily use different graphic organizers using different applications, for example, or softwares. Okay, so we have factual details. What you are writing there should be based on facts. You are not writing something that includes your opinion. Technical report is factual in nature. So all the facts that you need to put into it, you have to write it there. Okay, next we have information source. You have to, if you're a writer of that technical report, you have to consider where you got that information. It's very important. Actually, as we go along, we will discuss how to cite sources properly. It's very important to do so. Next, we have documentation. For documentation, you can also include pictures, and of course, you have to make sure that that report is well documented. And of course, realistic audience and situation, because you will be citing the audience and the real scenario where that thing happens. Okay, so those are the different characteristics. And of course, wait, I forgot headings and lists. Okay, so technical reports do have headings so that your target readers would easily locate the important information. And of course, it has lists. Now we move on to journalistic writing. We say journalistic writing, it's a style of writing used to report news stories in newspapers, on television broadcasts, on radio, and on the internet. Okay, so we would be able to know that that's journalistic writing if it has the following characteristics. One, it is simple, it is precise. Of course, you will not be writing a news that is not factual, it's not precise, or else other people would sue you to court by spreading fake news, right? Next, you have to be objective. You're not stating your opinion there if it's journalistic writing, unless it is an editorial writing, you know? And of course, it's factual. It should be fair and balanced. You have to find out the two sides of the story. Okay, it should not be biased. And of course, it observes inverted pyramid style of writing. What do we mean by inverted pyramid? Of course, from the very important one, for the important detail down to they're important, but not as important as the first one. Okay, so inverted pyramid, includes who are the persons involved, where does it involve, why did it happen, and then the other details will be discussed in the next succeeding paragraphs. Okay, so that's an inverted pyramid. Okay, next we go to science writing. Talking about science writing, we cannot avoid to be asked with a question. Is it the same with scientific writing? Well, actually, no, they're not the same. Okay, when we talk about scientific writing, it's a technical writing that is written by the scientists, of course, and their audience or readers are their peers who are also scientists. But when we talk about science writing, it is a form of writing about science for the popular media. So for example, you have National Geographic magazine. That's an example of science writing. Okay, Discovery magazine, it's a science writing magazine. Okay, I mean, it's a science writing. Okay, next, what are the characteristics of science writing? So first off, it should be clear, of course, so that, you know, the target readers would be able to understand. All right, it should be simple. Highfalutin words, flowery words are not included in science writing. Impartial, it should be, I mean, you should not be biased when you are writing science writing. It is structured logically, and of course, it is accurate. Of course, you are writing about science, so it must be accurate, of course, or else no one will subscribe to your magazine if you are not writing accurate facts, factual information. Okay, and of course, it has to be objective and not subjective.
Alright, so that ends our week 1 lesson. See you again, guys, in our next learning session. Take care!